Hello everyone and welcome back to the Slow Car Salon. Now you find me in the middle of a convertible top installation, and at this point I'm waiting for some glue to dry, and while I wait I figured I'd handle another cool little modification and show you, and that would be installing an aftermarket steering wheel and a hub and a custom horn button and all the other modifications and things that are meant to go along with it. So with that, let's get started. And here is the wheel in question. It is a 350mm diameter MOMO Monte Carlo with red stitch. Makes a nice match with some other interior components I have in here that also have red stitching. Plus, well, red car. To accompany it, I have a Works Bell SRS Boss hub, and this is meant specifically to work with the Miata with an airbag. Now you can get hubs that are meant for Miatas without airbags, but that requires some janky cutting and modification to the clock spring, and I don't want to deal with that. Plus, this comes with all the airbag resistors you need. And finally, as a nice little touch, this Mazda Speed logo style horn button from Rev Limiter. It's going to be a nice touch over the original MOMO red horn button that's supposed to go in there. I think it'll look a lot better than just a big red circle. Well anyways, those are the new parts. Let's start by getting the old steering wheel off. And you'll notice that I do have an NB steering wheel here in my NA, but the process to get it off is just as straightforward and easy as the original NA wheel. So the first thing to address here is the airbag. Now, like this wheel and on the NA wheel, there are two areas on the back sides of the steering wheel, these little covers that you can take off, like so, and it'll reveal a couple of 10mm bolts, and those are the only things that are holding the airbag in. Once you take that off, the airbag will come out, you can disconnect the connector for the airbag, and then there's a 19mm nut in the middle, which will take off or loosen, but then if you take it off all the way, put it back on a couple of threads, and you'll see why in just a moment. And now at this point, the steering nut is off. It's just now loose and kind of on by a couple of threads. It's also a 21, not a 19, by the way. I had to engage the steering lock in order to get enough torque on the hub in order to spin the nut off, but with that, now the wheel is essentially ready to pull off, and you're gonna need to do a lot of kind of back and forth motions either side using two hands, because often these are very tight. But keeping that nut on by a few threads prevents the wheel from flying off of the hub and slamming you in the face. With that sort of effect, probably. But anyways, that's all that's needed to get the original wheel off. So now with the original steering wheel removed and the clock spring and even the shaft here all centered and ready to go, we can't just simply throw in our hub just yet because we have the wiring to sort out. Now, I guess the expectation is with these airbag resistors and the other wires that comes with the Works Bell kit is that you take out the connector pins from your original connector wiring and then plug them directly into these. But because the only pin I have retained is the horn button pin, that's the only one I can actually plug into, and that'll be plugging into this guy here, which has a smaller female end for the car side, and then a larger end for the horn ring on the steering wheel side. Now, for these different airbag resistors, because I have this old Molex connector, which I use to connect to my NB airbag, I have to find some suitable pins of a similar size that I can plug into here, and then go from there. So before anything else, that's probably the first thing I'll have to address. If you haven't already made this kind of modification before, then you probably won't need to worry. You'll just have to get a very small screwdriver and pull the pins out of your plastic connector housing. And my solution comes in the form of the parts bin, because I found some of these very small female spade terminals, soldered them directly in, put some nice heat shrink on, and now this whole affair can be routed through the hub, so that's the next step here. Alright, the hub is bolted in, the nuts back in, torqued down to 22 foot-pounds, as that is the spec. We have our airbag resistor and one of our horn contact wires all plugged in, which means the next step here is to prepare the horn contact ring, and this is the one that comes with the MOMO wheel. And this is basically going to get sandwiched between the hub and the steering wheel, and one end of the wire, this side, as well as the one we connected earlier, will both plug in to the back of the horn button as there are two contacts, and this is obviously what then closes the circuit. So that's what we're going to get up to next, and we're going to make sure that our horn contact ring stays aligned with the bolt holes before we cinch it down with the bolts for the steering wheel. And there it is installed. However, there are a few things I'd like to highlight about getting this wheel in. First being the horn contact ring that goes underneath here. Now, I did try using the MOMO contact ring, but the way this little step lip back here interfered with the Works bell hub didn't allow the plate on the back here to sit flush against the hub. So I had to use the rev limiter horn contact ring. And then hooking that up also took a little bit of looking up on the rev limiter site, which was very easy. Now, there is this little ring at the bottom which provides a ground. If you happen to plug in the terminal here to this post on the contact ring, you're basically shorting the horn button to ground. So what I was finding is that I was putting the horn button in, it would it would go off every time I put it in. That's because as soon as this little ring right here made contact with the hub, it would just short out. Now, I should be clear about this, is that this pin here and this ground wire are both shorted to ground. These are both ground. This is your signal wire, so this should be the one coming from your clock spring. And then if for whatever reason this little wire on the bottom doesn't make contact with the outside of the hub, then that's where you add the additional wire from here to the post on the contact ring. So I just wanted to illustrate that. Otherwise, putting the whole thing in was very, very simple beyond that, and I don't get any shorting of the contact ring. And we can finally push that in, lock it in place, and we have a working horn that isn't shorting out. And finally, another component I ended up having to remove was this little ring which was on the front of the boss hub, right behind where the horn contact ring was. And at first I didn't realize I could pull it out, but I was able to just pull it out straight by hand. But yeah, this I guess was a little adapter for other horn contact rings or steering wheels of various sizes, but nice that they include this. But in my case with this MOMO wheel, I didn't have to use it, so I just pulled it right on out. Now the final test to validate whether or not those airbag resistors worked is we got to turn the ignition on. All right, so first thing, we have the airbag light turn on. Now turn off, turn off. Okay, and it stays off. Excellent, that is the marker of a good airbag delete. We're getting no blinks on the airbag light, so we are now all good to go. All right, well that steering wheel looks pretty amazing in here, I gotta say. It is a little bit smaller than the original wheel, so it will feel a whole lot different, but I think with any steering wheel modification you're going to do, it's going to change the way you experience your car. Now, there is one last thing in order to round off an airbag-less steering wheel install, and that is to handle part of the seat belts. There's a loop in the bottom of the seat belt here that breaks away in the case of an accident and extends the seatbelt about 12 inches so that you could come forward into the airbag in case of an accident. Now, because we have no airbag here, you're gonna get a face full of metal instead of an airbag. So it is recommended that you remove this loop in order to have the inertia reel lock you in place. It may bruise your body some more, but at least you won't have a face full of metal. Now, this loop exists on the passenger side of this Miata as well, and I don't quite understand why, because while it is a 1991 model, it did not come with a passenger airbag, nor did any Miata until 1994. So why this loop exists on the passenger side, I don't know. Either way, I'm not going to show you how to do this. However, there are resources to remove this loop because it is a safety modification and it is a liability, so you may proceed with that modification at your own risk. Anyways, that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I promise you guys there will be a Celica video coming up next. So I hope you'll see it, and I'll see you next time.